I'm Marcus Thompson, 34, and I'm working 3 jobs just to keep food on the table for my 7-year-old daughter, Emma. Every morning at 4 a.m. I'm stocking shelves at the grocery store. Afternoons I'm driving for a delivery service. Evenings, I clean offices until midnight, all so I can afford the child support and still have something left for the weekends when Emma stays with me. But last Tuesday, my world shattered when Emma looked up at me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Daddy, why don't you want to see me anymore?" My ex-wife had been telling her I was too busy, that I didn't care, that work mattered more than her. The truth was, I'd been fighting for more time with Emma for months. What I discovered about my ex-wife's real motives would expose a betrayal so deep it would change everything, not just for me, but for Emma's future. I sat in my beat-up Honda in the parking lot of Emma's elementary school, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Her words echoed in my mind. "Daddy, why don't you want to see me anymore?" The pain in her voice was like a knife twisting in my chest. How had it come to this? How had I become the villain in my own daughter's story? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Jake Martinez, my old college roommate who'd become a paralegal. If anyone could help me make sense of this legal nightmare, it was Jake. "Marcus, man, what's up?" Jake's voice was warm, familiar. "I need help, Jake. I think I'm losing my daughter." The custody papers were still in my glove compartment, worn from handling, creased from countless readings. Joint custody, they said, equal time. But Sarah had been chipping away at that arrangement for months, citing my work schedule, my instability, my apparent lack of commitment to Emma's well-being. The irony burned. I worked 3 jobs precisely because I wanted to be the best father I could be. Every dollar I earned went toward child support, rent for a 2-bedroom apartment so Emma could have her own room, and the 1,000 little expenses that came with being a parent: school supplies, birthday parties, the occasional trip to the zoo at 4 a.m. while Sarah slept in her comfortable suburban home. I was at Peterson's Market unloading trucks and stocking shelves. The manager, Mr. Peterson, had been kind enough to work around my schedule, knowing I needed to be available for Emma's school events. But even his flexibility couldn't stretch far enough to cover everything. My delivery job with Quick Dash filled the afternoon hours, racing around the city bringing food to people who could afford the convenience. The irony wasn't lost on me. Was delivering meals to families who were probably sitting down together for dinner while I missed another evening with Emma. Then came the night shift at Clearwater Office Complex, mopping floors and emptying trash cans in corporate buildings. The work was mindless, but it gave me time to think. Too much time. I'd picture Emma at Sarah's house, probably wondering why Daddy wasn't there to help with homework or read bedtime stories. The divorce had been Sarah's idea. "We've grown apart," she'd said, standing in our kitchen with her arms crossed, her voice cold and final. "I need space to figure out who I am." Who she was, apparently, was someone who could afford a bigger house, a newer car, and vacations to places Emma would mention in passing during our weekends together. "Mummy says we might go to Disney World next month," Emma had said just last week, her eyes bright with excitement. I'd smiled and nodded, my heart sinking. Disney World wasn't in my budget. Hell, Chuck E. Cheese was a stretch, but Sarah's casual mention of these expenses had started to nag at me. How was she affording this lifestyle? Her job at the marketing firm paid well, but not Disney World well, not new BMW well, not private school tuition well. I'd tried to ask her about it once diplomatically. "Things seem to be going well for you financially," I'd said during one of our brief exchanges when picking up Emma. "That's none of your business anymore, Marcus," she'd replied, her voice sharp. "Just focus on yourself." But it was my business, wasn't it? If Sarah was making more money than she'd claimed during the divorce proceedings, it could affect the custody arrangement, the child support calculations, everything now. Sitting in my car outside Emma's school, I realized I needed to find out the truth, not for revenge, not to hurt Sarah, but for Emma. My daughter deserved to know that her father loved her, that every sacrifice I made was for her, and that the story she'd been told about my indifference was a lie. I started the engine and headed to my afternoon shift, but my mind was already working, planning. If Sarah wanted to play games with Emma's emotions, she was about to discover that I wasn't the pushover she thought I was. The fight for my daughter's heart was just beginning. That evening, after finishing my shift at the office complex, I did something I hadn't done in months. I looked at Sarah's social media. I'd unfriended her after the divorce, but her Instagram account was public, a carefully curated showcase of her new life. The photos were a parade of abundance that made my stomach turn. Sarah at a wine tasting in Napa Valley, her smile radiant, as she held up a glass of something that probably cost more than my grocery budget for a week. Emma at what looked like a high-end resort pool, wearing a designer swimsuit I definitely hadn't bought her. Sarah's living room redecorated with furniture that screamed expensive taste. But it was the caption on her latest post that really got to me. "Grateful for this beautiful life and all the blessings that come with following your dreams. Emma and I are living our best lives. #blessed, #momlife, #gratitude, our best lives." What about the life Emma was supposed to have with both her parents? I scrolled further back, my throat tightening with each image. A weekend in Seattle. A shopping trip where Emma was holding bags from stores I couldn't afford to walk into. A photo of Sarah's kitchen counter covered with expensive organic groceries. The kind I looked at longingly in the store before reaching for the generic brands. The timeline didn't make sense. These photos started appearing about 6 months after our divorce was finalized, right around the time Sarah had started making excuses for why I couldn't have Emma on some of my scheduled weekends. She has plans with friends, Sarah would say. Or, we have a family commitment. Family commitment, like I wasn't family. I clicked on a photo from last week in Dima at what looked like a fancy brunch place, syrup dripping from a stack of pancakes that probably cost $15. The timestamp showed it was taken during what should have been my time with Emma. Mommy had to cancel your weekend, Emma had told me apologetically when I'd called to confirm pickup. She said something came up, like brunch, at a place I couldn't afford. I studied Sarah's face in the photos, looking for clues. She looked different, more confident, more polished. Her hair was professionally styled. Her clothes were designer brands I recognized from magazine ads. Even her jewelry had upgraded from the modest pieces she'd worn during our marriage to items that caught the light, like small investments. The woman in these photos wasn't the same person who'd claimed during our divorce proceedings that she was just getting by on her marketing salary. The woman who'd argued that she needed maximum child support because raising Emma was financially overwhelming. I opened my laptop and pulled up the divorce decree, scanning the financial disclosures we'd both been required to submit. Sarah's listed income, $48,000 annually. Her expenses, carefully calculated to show she was barely breaking even with my support payments. But the woman living this Instagram lifestyle wasn't barely breaking even, she was thriving. I did some quick math in my head. The resort weekend alone would have cost more than my monthly rent. The BMW in her driveway, I'd noticed it the last time I picked up Emmy, was easily a $500 a month payment. The private violin lessons Emma had mentioned, those weren't cheap either. Either Sarah had come into money, or she'd been lying about her finances all along. I thought about Emma's innocent comments over the past few months. Little details I'd dismissed as childish exaggeration. Mummy's friend David bought us dinner at the fancy place with the cloth napkins. Mummy said we might get a pool in the backyard. David has a really big house too. Sarah had mentioned him a few times, always casually, always as just a friend. David from work, she'd called him. But now I wondered if David was more than just a friend or if he was something else entirely. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. Sarah's perfect life was funded by something, and whatever it was, she'd made sure to hide it from the court, from me, and apparently from the child support calculations that were bleeding me dry while I worked myself to exhaustion. The anger was building in my chest, hot and righteous. Not just anger at the money, though that stung. Anger at the deception. Anger at the way Emma was being taught to see me as the parent who didn't care, while Sarah played the role of the devoted mother who could provide everything. But mostly, anger at how Emma was being used as a pawn in whatever game Sarah was playing. I closed the laptop and rubbed my eyes. Tomorrow I would call Jake again. It was time to dig deeper, to find out what Sarah was really hiding, because if she wanted to destroy my relationship with Emma by painting me as the absent, uncaring father, she was going to discover that I would fight for my daughter with everything I had, even if everything I had wasn't much compared to Sarah's mysterious windfall. It included something she was forgetting, the truth. And the truth, I was beginning to realize, was something Sarah was very afraid of. The paper was crumpled and torn, barely the size of a credit card, but it might as well have been a smoking gun. I found it in Emma's backpack when I was helping her with homework during our Saturday afternoon together, a fragment of what looked like a bank statement, caught in the spiral binding of her notebook. "What's this, sweetheart?" I asked gently, smoothing out the paper. Emma glanced at it and shrugged. "I don't know. Mummy had papers everywhere this morning. She was yelling at David on the phone about something." The fragment showed partial account, information enough to see that it wasn't Sarah's regular checking account, and definitely not the modest balance she'd claimed during our divorce. The visible numbers showed deposits that made my heart race. Even incomplete, I could see figures that were far beyond what someone making $48,000 a year should have. I tucked the paper into my wallet, my hands surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. That evening, after dropping Emma back at Sarah's, I called Jake. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me," I said, sitting in my car outside a 7-Eleven. "If someone was hiding assets during a divorce, what would that look like?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, what did you find?" I told him about the Instagram photos, the lifestyle that didn't match Sarah's claimed income, and finally about the bank statement fragment. "Okay," Jake said slowly. "First things first, you can't use that paper in court. You found it accidentally, but if Sarah claims it was stolen, it becomes inadmissible. But it can point us in the right direction." "Us? I'm helping you, man. This isn't just about money, this is about Emma. If Sarah committed fraud during the divorce proceedings, if she hid assets, that changes everything. The custody arrangement, the support calculations, all of it. Jake explained the basics. Hidden assets could take many forms: separate accounts, property held in someone else's name, business income not properly disclosed, even gifts or loans that were really income in disguise. The David guy Emma mentioned, Jake said. Tell me more about him. Sarah says he's just a friend from work, but Emma talks about him like he's around a lot. And she mentioned he has a big house too, that he bought them dinner at expensive places. Could be a boyfriend she's hiding to avoid complicating custody, or could be something else entirely. What's Sarah's work situation like? I realized how little I actually knew about Sarah's current job. During our marriage, she'd worked for a small marketing firm, handling social media accounts for local businesses. Decent work, but nothing that would explain her current lifestyle. I don't really know, I admitted. She says she's still in marketing, but she's been vague about details. We need to find out. Legally everything above board. Jake's voice carried the weight of his legal training. I can help you pull public records, property transactions, business filings, that kind of thing. But Marcus, you need to understand what you're getting into. If we find evidence that Sarah committed fraud, this could get ugly fast. It's already ugly, Jake. My daughter thinks I don't want to see her because I'm too busy working. I'm working 3 jobs to pay support based on Sarah claiming she's barely scraping by, while she's posting pictures from Napa Valley. How much uglier can it get? After we hung up, I sat in my car for a long time thinking about the choice in front of me. I could let things continue as they were, accepting that Emma would grow up thinking I was the parent who chose work over family. Or I could fight, knowing that fighting might expose truths that would change everything, not just for me and Sarah, but for Emma too. The decision was easier than I expected. Emma deserved to know the truth about both her parents, even if that truth was complicated. She deserved to understand that love sometimes looked like working 3 jobs to support the people you care about, and that the parent who seemed to have everything might not be the parent who was being completely honest. I started the engine and headed home to my small apartment, my mind already working through the steps ahead. Jake would help me research Sarah's finances legally and ethically. We'd find out where the money was coming from, who David really was, and what Sarah had been hiding. Most importantly, we'd build a case that would give Emma the full picture of both her parents, the one who'd been working himself to exhaustion out of love, and the one who'd been willing to lie about it to win. Emma spread her crayons across my small kitchen table with the focused intensity that only 7-year-olds possess. It was Sunday afternoon, our weekly art time, and I was cherishing these quiet moments together. Working 3 jobs meant our time was precious, every minute counted. What are you drawing today, sweetheart? I asked, settling into the chair beside her. My family, she said without looking up, her small hand gripping a brown crayon with determination. I watched as she drew what looked like a big house with lots of windows and what appeared to be a swimming pool in the backyard. The right. She drew a smaller house, much smaller, with just 2 windows and a simple door. Tell me about your picture, I said gently. Emma pointed to the big house. This is Mummy's house. See the pool? Mummy says we might get it soon, and this is David's car. She'd drawn what looked like a sports car in the driveway. He comes over a lot to help Mummy with work stuff. Then she pointed to the smaller house. This is your house, Daddy. It's okay that it's smaller. Mummy says you're still figuring things out. The casual cruelty of that phrase, still figuring things out, hit me like a physical blow. Sarah was poisoning our daughter against me with 1,000 small cuts, each comment designed to diminish me in Emma's eyes while elevating herself. What do you think about Daddy still figuring things out? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Emma. They finally looked up at me, her expression serious beyond her years. I think you work really hard, Daddy. Sometimes when I call you, you sound tired. Mummy says that's because you don't know how to balance things yet. Don't know how to balance things. As if working 3 jobs to support my daughter was a character flaw rather than a sacrifice. How do you feel when Mummy says things like that? I asked. Emma shrugged, but I caught something in her expression, a flicker of confusion, maybe pain. I don't know. Sometimes I feel sad because I want you to be happy like Mummy is. Mummy smiles a lot now. She says it's because she's finally free to be herself. Free to be herself. Another knife twist, delivered through our daughter's innocent voice. Emma picked up a blue crayon and started drawing stick figures. In the big house, she drew 3 figures herself, Sarah, and presumably David. In the small house, she drew just 1 figure, standing alone. Is that Daddy in the small house? I asked. Yeah, you're by yourself because you're always working. But don't worry, Daddy. Someday maybe you'll figure it out and then you can be happy too. The patronizing tone was pure Sarah, filtered through Emma's loving heart. My daughter was trying to comfort me with the very lies that were designed to tear us apart. Emma, can I tell you something important? She nodded, setting down her crayon. Daddy works hard because he loves you. Every job I have, every hour I work, it's so I can take care of you and make sure you have everything you need. When I'm tired, It's not because I'm sad or because I haven't figured things out. It's because I'm doing everything I can to be the best daddy for you. Emma studied my face with those wide, intelligent eyes. But Mummy says, I know what Mummy says. And Mummy loves you too. But sometimes grown-ups see things differently. What matters is that both Mummy and Daddy love you. Very, very much, even when we don't agree about everything. She picked up a red crayon and added something to a drawing, a heart floating between the two houses like this. She asked, exactly like that. We spent the rest of the afternoon working on her picture, and I watched as she gradually added more details. In the big house, the stick figures were surrounded by lots of stuffed toys, a big TV, what looked like expensive furniture. In the small house, the single figure was surrounded by books, a small TV, and what I realized were art supplies. The small house has different things, I observed. Yeah, your house has the things we do together, art stuff and books and games. Mommy's house has prettier things, but we don't really do much together because she's always busy with David or on the phone. The innocence of her observation was heartbreaking. Emma was already noticing the difference between material abundance and emotional presence, even if she couldn't fully articulate it yet. As I helped her clean up the art supplies, Emma grabbed my hand. Daddy, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Do you really not want to see me more? Mummy says you could see me more if you wanted to, but you choose to work instead. There it was, the question that had been building all afternoon, delivered with the devastating directness of childhood. I knelt down so we were at eye level. Emma, I want to see you every single day. I want to wake up and make you breakfast and help you get ready for school and pick you up and help with homework and read you stories at bedtime. I want all of that, every day. Her eyes filled with tears. Then why don't you? Because sometimes grown-up rules are complicated. But I want you to know something, and I want you to remember it. Always, there is nothing in this world more important to me than you. Nothing. She hugged me then, fierce and tight, and I held her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the lingering smell of crayons on her hands. When I dropped her off at Sarah's that evening, Emma ran inside, clutching her drawing. Through the window I could see Sarah looking at it, her expression unreadable. Then she glanced at me, and for just a moment, I saw something that might have been guilt cross her face. But the moment passed, and she closed the door without a word that night. I couldn't sleep. Emma's drawing was burned into my memory, the small house with the lonely figure, the big house with everything except genuine connection. My daughter was living in two worlds, being taught to see one as superior to the other, and I was powerless to give her the perspective she needed to understand the truth, but not for much longer. Jake and I were going to find out what Sarah was hiding, and when we did, Emma would finally understand that love wasn't measured by the size of your house or the expense of your gifts. Love was measured by sacrifice, by showing up, by working 3 jobs if that's what it took to be there for the people who mattered most. Jake's office was tucked into a strip mall between a nail salon and a dry cleaner, but his computer setup would have made a tech company jealous. He'd always been good with research, even in college, and his paralegal training had turned its skill into something approaching artistry. Okay, he said, pulling up multiple windows on his dual monitors. I've been digging into public records, and your ex-wife has been busy. He turned one screen toward me. Sarah Elizabeth Thompson, that's still her legal name. By the way, purchased a house 18 months ago for $485,000. Cash. My stomach dropped. Cash. No mortgage, no loan documents, straight cash purchase. Jake clicked to another window. Property records show the previous owner was David Chen. Sound familiar? David, that's the guy Emma keeps mentioning, Sarah's friend from work. Gets better. David Chen owns Velocity Marketing Solutions, which was incorporated 2 years ago. Guess who's listed as the co- I stared at the screen, reading Sarah's name next to David's on the business registration documents. She never mentioned owning a business, because she had to report business ownership during divorce proceedings. This company was formed 6 months after your divorce was finalized. But look at this. Jake pulled up another document. The initial business license application shows they'd been operating as an LLC since before your divorce. They just changed the structure afterward. The pieces were starting to come together, and the picture they formed was making me sick. So she was hiding business income during the divorce. Looks like it, but that's not even the best part. Jake's fingers flew across the keyboard. Velocity Marketing Solutions has some interesting clients. 3 of them are companies owned by David's family, his father's real estate development company, his sister's restaurant chain, and his uncle's construction business. That sounds like money laundering. Family money being funneled through the business to make it look like legitimate income. That's what I'm thinking too. Jake leaned back in his chair. The business shows revenue of about $200,000 last year, split between Sarah and David, but the work they're billing for, consultation services and brand development, is pretty vague. I felt a mixture of vindication and nausea. I'd been working myself to death paying child support calculated on the assumption that Sarah was barely getting by, while she was pulling in 4 times her reported income through a business sheet hidden from the court. There's more, Jake continued. I pulled vehicle registrations. The BMW Emma mentioned, it's registered to Velocity Marketing Solutions as a business expense. So is a boat I found registered to David, but with Sarah listed as an authorized user, a boat, 36-foot cabin cruiser, not exactly a work vehicle. Jake printed out several documents and handed them to me. Marcus, if even half of this is accurate, Sarah committed serious fraud during your divorce proceedings. She hid assets, underreported income, and may have perjured herself in sworn financial statements. I stared at the papers in my hands: property records, business filings, vehicle registrations. Each document was another piece of evidence that my ex-wife had systematically lied to the court, to me, and indirectly to our daughter about the reality of our situation. What does this mean for Emma's custody? I asked. It means we go back to court. Financial fraud invalidates the original custody arrangement. If Sarah was hiding income, the child support calculations were based on false information. More importantly, if we can prove she deliberately deceived the court, it calls her character into question. Jake pulled up one more document. This is the kicker. David Chen's father owns the development company that built Sarah's neighborhood. The house she bought was sold to her for about $100,000 below market value. That's essentially a gift that should have been reported as income. She's been playing me for a fool this entire time, and using Emma as leverage to keep you from digging too deep. Think about it. Every time you complained about the custody arrangement or the support payments, what happened? I thought back to the conversations with Sarah, the way she'd deflected any questions about money by making it about Emma's needs, about my inadequacies as a father, about how I was being selfish by questioning the arrangements. She'd turn it around and make it about me not caring enough about Emma. Exactly. Classic manipulation. Keep you focused on defending yourself instead of asking the hard questions about where her money was coming from. Jake gathered the documents into a folder. I know a family law attorney who specializes in cases like this. Melissa Chino, relation to David. I checked. She's good, and she's seen financial fraud in divorce cases before. Can I afford her? That's the beautiful thing about fraud cases. If we can prove Sarah hid assets, she could be liable for your legal fees, plus penalties, plus retroactive support adjustments. You might end up coming out ahead financially for the first time in months. I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Not just hope for financial relief, though that would be life-changing, but hope that Emma would finally understand the truth about both her parents. There's one more thing, Jake said, his tone more serious. Sarah's going to fight this hard. People don't commit this level of fraud casually. She's been planning this for a long time. When she realizes we're onto her, she's going to do everything she can to discredit you, to make you look like the bitter ex-husband going after her out of spite. Let her try. I've got nothing to hide. I know that, but she doesn't know that. She's been controlling the narrative for so long. She probably believes her own lies at this point. Just be prepared. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. I looked at the folder of evidence in my hands, thinking about Emma's drawing from the day before, about her innocent questions about why Daddy didn't want to see her more. This wasn't about revenge against Sarah. This was about truth, about giving my daughter the full picture of both her parents. When do we start? Jake smiled. We already did. I'll call Melissa tomorrow and set up a consultation. But Marcus, document everything from now on. Every interaction with Sarah, every conversation with Emma, every cancelled visit or changed plan. We're building a case, and we need to be bulletproof. As I drove home that night, I felt lighter than I had in months. The truth was finally coming out, and with it, the possibility that Emma would understand her father hadn't chosen work over her. He'd chosen to fight for her in the only way he knew how. I finally met David Chen on a Tuesday evening when I went to pick up Emma for dinner. Sarah had been evasive about our midweek visits lately, always finding reasons why Emma couldn't leave the house, but this time she'd agreed to let Emma come with me to her favorite pizza place. When I knocked on the door, it wasn't Sarah who answered. It was a man in his early 30s, wearing expensive jeans and a polo shirt that probably costs more than I made in a day. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced, and his eyes held the calculating look of someone who was always working an angle. You must be Marcus, he said, like we were old friends. I'm David. I've heard so much about you. I'll bet you have, I thought, studying his face. He was handsome in the way that money often makes men handsome, well-groomed, confident, with a kind of dental work that spoke of privilege and careful attention to appearances. David's been helping me with some business projects, Sarah said. Appearing behind him, she looked nervous, which was unusual for her. He's incredibly talented with marketing strategy. Emma bounded down the stairs, her backpack already packed for our evening together. Hi, Daddy. David taught me how to play chess yesterday. He's really good at it, is he? I said, my eyes still on David. What kind of business are you in, David? Marketing consultation, primarily. I help family businesses develop their digital presence. His answer was smooth, rehearsed. Sarah and I make a great team. She handles the creative side while I focus on the technical implementation. That sounds like a partnership, I observed. More like a collaboration, Sarah interjected quickly. David's been incredibly generous with his time and expertise. But as we talked, I noticed things that didn't match the story of casual collaboration. David answered the door like he lived there. His shoes were by the entrance alongside Sarah's and Emma's. When Emma mentioned being hungry, David automatically went to the kitchen and started preparing her a snack with the familiarity of someone who knew where everything was kept. "How long have you two been working together?" I asked. "About 2 years," David said. "Sarah's incredibly talented. I'm lucky to have found such a creative partner." 2 years. That would put their collaboration starting right around the time of our divorce. The timeline was getting clearer, and the picture it painted was making my blood pressure rise. When Emma ran upstairs to get her jacket, I found myself alone with David for a moment. He used the opportunity to show his true colors. "Look, Marcus, I know this situation might feel awkward," he said, his voice taking on a slightly patronizing tone. "But Sarah's really found her stride lately. She's building something special, and Emma's thriving in this environment. This environment, stability, security, the kind of life a little girl deserves." He gestured around the house, the expensive furniture, the large TV, the general air of affluence. "I'm sure you understand that Emma's welfare has to come first." The implication was clear. This house, this lifestyle, this manufactured stability was superior to anything I could provide. He was delivering the same message Sarah had been sending through Emma, but with less subtlety. "I absolutely agree that Emma's welfare comes first," I said evenly. "That's why I work 3 jobs to make sure she's taken care of." David's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in his eyes. "Of course, though sometimes working less and earning more is a matter of working smarter, not harder." Before I could respond, Emma came back downstairs, and Sarah handed me a folder of school papers and upcoming events. As I looked through them, I noticed something interesting. Several of the activities listed were expensive. Private art classes, a weekend science camp, violin lessons with what appeared to be a prestigious instructor. "These all look great," I said. "What's the cost breakdown? I want to make sure I'm contributing my fair share." Sarah and David exchanged a quick glance so fast I almost missed it. "Oh, don't worry about that," Sarah said. "I've got it covered. David's business has been doing really well, and he's been generous enough to help with some of Emma's enrichment activities. As an investment in her future," David added smoothly, "every child deserves the best opportunities available." It was the benevolent patriarch narrative. David wasn't just Sarah's business partner or even her boyfriend. He was positioning himself as Emma's benefactor, the man who could provide opportunities that her biological father couldn't afford. As Emma and I left for dinner, I heard David call out, "Have fun, you too. Emma, tell your dad about the piano recital next weekend." Piano recital. Another expensive activity I hadn't been consulted about, couldn't afford to contribute to, and would probably have to hear about secondhand. During dinner, Emma chatted happily about her life at Sarah's house. David featured prominently in her stories. David had helped her with a science project. David had shown her how to use the fancy coffee machine to make hot chocolate. David had taken her and Sarah to a baseball game with box seats. "You really like David?" I observed. "He's nice," Emma said, twirling spaghetti on her fork. "He knows a lot about everything, and he makes mommy laugh." "That's good. What kind of things does he know about?" "Business stuff, mostly. He's always on the phone talking about money and deals and things. Sometimes he and mommy work in the office upstairs for hours." "Office upstairs?" Another piece of information that didn't match the story of casual collaboration. "Do you know what kind of work they do together?" Emma shrugged. "Computer stuff. They make websites for people." David says they're building an empire. Building an empire. With money that should have been declared during our divorce proceedings. Money that was supposed to be accounted for in child support calculations. Money that was allowing them to create a lifestyle designed to make me look inadequate by comparison. After dinner, as I drove Emma back to Sarah's house, I thought about David's carefully crafted persona. He was everything I wasn't: financially successful, available during regular business hours, able to provide Emma with experiences I couldn't afford. But more than that, he was complicit in Sarah's deception, helping her create a narrative where I was the struggling, inadequate parent while they were the stable, successful couple. When I dropped Emma off, David was waiting in the doorway again, like a lord of the manor welcoming the peasant who'd been granted a brief audience with the princess. "Thanks for bringing her back safely," he said, his tone suggesting I'd done something praiseworthy rather than simply spent time with my own daughter. That night, I called Jake and shared everything I'd observed. The partnership that looked more like a relationship, the expensive activities Emma was being enrolled in without my knowledge, and most importantly, David's casual mention of building an empire. "Sounds like they're getting comfortable," Jake said. "Maybe too comfortable. People who are hiding something usually try to keep a lower profile." "What's our next step?" "We meet with Melissa Chen tomorrow and Marcus. Bring everything, document every observation, every detail about David and Sarah's business partnership, because I'm starting to think this isn't just about hidden income. I think they've been running a long con, and you've been the mark." As I hung up the phone, I thought about Emma's innocent admiration for David, her acceptance of him as a fixture in her life. My daughter was being used as a prop in whatever scheme Sarah and David were running, and that was the part I couldn't forgive. The money was one thing, the lies were another. But using Emma to validate their deception, turning my own daughter into a weapon against me, was where this had crossed from civil disagreement to something much darker. They wanted to build an empire. They were about to discover that empires built on lies had a tendency to crumble when the truth finally came to light. The conversation with attorney Melissa Chen had been enlightening and terrifying in equal measure. She'd confirmed what Jake and I suspected. Sarah's financial deception was extensive enough to invalidate our divorce agreement and potentially that result in criminal charges for fraud. But she'd also warned me that confronting Sarah directly could backfire spectacularly. Let me handle the legal strategy, Melissa had said. But if you're determined to talk to her first, record everything. In this state, you only need one-party consent for recording conversations. Whatever she says could be crucial evidence. So here I was, sitting in my car outside Sarah's house at 8 p.m. on a Thursday, my phone's recording app ready, trying to work up the courage to have a conversation that would probably destroy what remained of our ability to co-parent civilly. Sarah answered the door, looking harried, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her usually perfect makeup smudged around her eyes. Marcus, Emma's already asleep. What are you doing here? I need to talk to you about some things that have come to my attention. Can we sit down? She hesitated, glancing back into the house. I could hear David's voice from somewhere inside. Apparently on a phone call. This isn't a good time. Can we schedule something for Sarah? I know about Velocity Marketing Solutions. The color drained from her face. For a moment she just stared at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in her before: genuine fear. I don't know what you think you know, she said finally, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. I know you and David own a business together. I know you've been hiding income from the court. I know you bought your house with cash that you didn't report during our divorce proceedings. I kept my voice level, factual. I'm not here to threaten you, Sarah. I'm here to give you a chance to explain before this gets ugly. She stepped outside and closed the door behind her, clearly not wanting David to hear our conversation. You have no idea what you're talking about, she said, but the words came out shaky, defensive. David and I are friends. He's helped me with some freelance work. But Sarah, I've seen the business registration documents. I've seen the property. Records your house was sold to you by David's father for $100,000 under market value. The BMW is registered to your business as a company vehicle. You've been spying on me. The fear in her voice was giving way to anger, which I recognized as her default defense mechanism. You've been investigating me like some kind of stalker. I've been trying to understand how someone who claimed she was barely getting by suddenly has enough money for Disney vacations and private violin lessons. I pulled out my phone, making sure she could see that I was recording Sarah. This is your chance to tell me the truth. Why did you hide the business income? She stared at the phone, then at me, and I watched her cycling through what looked like different prepared responses before settling on attack mode. This is exactly why I left you, Marcus. This paranoid, controlling behavior. You can't stand that I'm successful, that I've built something for myself and Emma. Built something with money you should have disclosed during our divorce. I don't have to disclose anything to you anymore. We're divorced. My finances are none of your business. They are when they affect child support calculations. They are when you've been telling Emma that Daddy doesn't want to see her because he's too busy working, while you're hiding income that could have changed our custody arrangement. That hit home. Sarah's facade cracked just enough for me to see the guilt underneath. I never told Emma you didn't want to see her. Daddy's still figuring things out. Daddy doesn't know how to balance things yet. Daddy could see you more, if he really wanted to, but he chooses to work instead. I watched her face as I repeated her words back to her. Should I go on? That's not here, twisting my words, am I? Because Emma repeats these things to me verbatim. Sarah, she thinks I don't love her enough to make time for her. While you're living in a house you bought with money you hid from the court. David appeared in the doorway behind her, his expression concerned but controlled. Everything okay out here? He asked, but his eyes were on my phone. David, this is between me and Sarah, I said. Actually, if you're discussing the business, it concerns me too. He stepped outside, positioning himself slightly in front of Sarah in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. Sarah told me you were having some financial difficulties. If you need help, I need honesty. I cut him off. I need to know how long you two have been running this business together, and why Sarah felt the need to hide it during our divorce proceedings. David and Sarah exchanged another one of those quick glances, the kind that spoke of extensive, private conversations about exactly this scenario. We started collaborating about 18 months ago, David said carefully. Sarah's incredibly talented, and my family's businesses needed someone with her skill set. It's been mutually beneficial. Mutually beneficial enough for you to sell her a house at below market rates. The house was a business decision. Sarah needed a proper home office space, and the house happened to fit her needs. Everything about his response was calculated, rehearsed. These two had been preparing for this conversation, probably for months. And the BMW, the boat, the expensive activities for Emma. David's been incredibly generous, Sarah said, finding her voice again. He cares about Emma's development, her opportunities. He cares about Emma enough to help her mother commit fraud. The word fraud hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. David's carefully maintained composure slipped just enough for me to see the calculation behind his eyes. That's a serious accusation, he said. I hope you have legal representation before you start throwing around terms like that. I do, and she's very interested in your business structure, your family connections, and the timeline of when your collaboration with Sarah really began. Sarah started to speak, but David put a hand on her arm, a gesture so automatic it spoke of long intimacy, despite their claims of being just business partners. I think this conversation is over, David said. If you have legal concerns, you should address them through proper channels. That's exactly what I plan to do. I stopped the recording and put my phone away. Sarah, I want you to think about Emma. Really think about her. She's going to find out the truth eventually, and when she does, she's going to remember which parent was honest with her and which parent used her as a pawn in a game she was too young to understand. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but whether they were tears of guilt or anger, I couldn't tell. Get off my property, she said quietly. As I walked back to my car, I heard David's voice through the closed door, low and urgent, having what sounded like a very intense conversation with Sarah, whatever they were discussing. It wasn't the casual chat of business partners, it was the worried conference of co-conspirators who'd just realized their carefully constructed house of cards was about to fall down. The recording on my phone would be useful, but more importantly, I'd seen their faces when confronted with the truth. They weren't just hiding income, they were running scared, and scared people make mistakes. Tomorrow, Melissa would file our motion to reopen the divorce case based on fraud. But tonight, driving home through the quiet streets, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. The satisfaction of watching my ex-wife realize that the man she'd dismissed as too broken to fight back had just called her bluff. The game was changing, and for the first time since our divorce, I was the one holding the winning cards. The call from Emma's school came on a Friday afternoon while I was restocking the freezer section at Peterson's Market. Mrs. Rodriguez, Emma's second-grade teacher, had a tone in her voice that immediately put me on alert. Mr. Thompson, I was hoping we could schedule a conference about Emma. She's been having some behavioral changes lately, and I think it would be beneficial for us to discuss them. I set down the box of frozen peas I'd been organizing. What kind of behavioral changes? She's become quite withdrawn in class. Yesterday, she had a crying episode during art time that lasted nearly 20 minutes. When I asked her what was wrong, she said she was worried about her family falling apart. My heart sank. Can we meet today after school? Of course. I'll also ask Mrs. Patterson, our school counselor, to join us if that's acceptable to you. 3 hours later, I was sitting in Emma's classroom, looking at examples of her recent schoolwork spread across the small table. The change from her earlier assignments was stark and heartbreaking. These are from September, Mrs. Rodriguez said, showing me a math worksheet covered in Emma's careful handwriting. Her answers were correct, her numbers neat and precise, and these are from this week. The recent papers told a different story. Emma's usually meticulous handwriting was sloppy, distracted. Several assignments were incomplete, with doodles in the margins, the same sad houses from her drawing at my apartment, repeated over and over. Mrs. Patterson, the counselor, was a kind woman in her 50s with the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent decades helping children navigate emotional turbulence. Emma's teachers have all noticed a change, she said gently. She's always been a bright, engaged student, but lately she seems preoccupied. During lunch, she sits by herself. At recess, she doesn't play with the other children as much. Have you talked to her about what's bothering her? I have. She's very articulate for her age, but she's also clearly conflicted about what she's allowed to say. Mrs. Patterson opened a folder. I took some notes during our conversations that I'd like to share with you. She handed me a sheet of paper with Emma's words transcribed in neat handwriting. My daddy works all the time because he has to pay money to Mummy. Mummy says Daddy could spend more time with me if he wanted to, but he chooses to work instead. But I think Daddy looks sad when he drops me off. I don't know who's telling the truth. David is nice to me and he buys me things. But sometimes I hear him and Mummy talking about Daddy, and they don't say nice things. It makes me feel bad because Daddy is good to me when we're together. I wish Mummy and Daddy could be friends. Again, not married, but friends. But Mummy gets mad when I talk about Daddy too much. Reading Emma's words felt like being punched in the stomach. My 7-year-old daughter was carrying the weight of adult deceptions, trying to navigate loyalties. She was too young to understand. There's something else, Mrs. Patterson said carefully. Emma mentioned that her mother told her not to talk about certain things with you. When I asked what things, she said money stuff and David stuff. She's been coached, I said, the words coming out harder than I intended. It appears so, and that's putting tremendous stress on her. Children Emma's age don't understand why they can't tell the truth to both parents. It makes them feel like they're lying, even when they're trying to follow rules. Mrs. Rodriguez pulled out another folder. There's also this. She showed me a story Emma had written for a creative writing assignment titled My Family. My Family by Emma Thompson. I have a mommy and a daddy who don't live together anymore. Mommy lives in a big house with lots of nice things. David lives there too, but he's not my daddy. He's mommy's friend who helps with work. Daddy lives in a smaller house, but we do fun things there like art and reading. Sometimes I get confused about things because mommy and daddy tell me different things. Mommy says daddy is too busy to see me more, but daddy seems happy when we're together. David says daddy needs to learn how to be more successful like him. But I think daddy works really hard. I love both my houses, but I wish everyone could just tell me the truth about everything. I don't like having secrets from daddy or mommy. It makes my stomach hurt. I hope someday everyone can just be honest and we can all be happy. The end. The innocence and wisdom in Emma's words broke my heart. She was essentially begging the adults in her life to stop using her as a messenger and a weapon. Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Patterson said gently, I need to ask, are you currently involved in any legal proceedings regarding custody? Yes, we're in the process of reopening the divorce case based on some new information. I thought so. Emma's stress levels are consistent with children caught in high-conflict custody situations. She's showing signs of what we call loyalty conflicts. She loves both parents but feels like she has to choose sides. Mrs. Rodriguez leaned forward. We're also concerned about her academic performance. Emma is a bright child, but emotional stress can significantly impact learning. If this continues, she may need additional support. I looked at Emma's schoolwork again, at the evidence of my daughter's pain scattered across the table. Sarah's manipulation wasn't just hurting Emma, it was damaging Emma in ways that might take years to repair. What can I do to help her? Consistency is crucial, Mrs. Patterson explained. Whatever is happening between you and Emma's mother, Emma needs to know that her relationship with each parent is separate and safe. She needs permission to love both of you without feeling guilty. And honesty appropriately, Mrs. Rodriguez added. Children can sense when adults are being deceptive. It makes them feel insecure and anxious. I thought about Emma's questions during our weekend together. Her confusion about why the adults in her life seem to have different versions of the same story. Is there anything I should avoid doing? Don't ask her to carry messages to her mother. Don't ask her for information about what happens at her mother's house unless she volunteers it. And most importantly, don't make her feel responsible for the conflict between you and her mother. Mrs. Patterson handed me a pamphlet about children and divorce. There are some excellent resources here about helping children navigate parental conflict. The key is reassuring Emma that the adult problems are not her fault and not her responsibility to fix. As I left the school that afternoon, I felt a new urgency about resolving the legal situation with Sarah. This wasn't just about money or custody schedules anymore. My daughter was suffering real emotional damage from the web of lies and manipulation surrounding her that evening. I called Melissa Chen and shared what I'd learned at the school conference. This actually strengthens our case, she said. Schools are mandated reporters, and Mrs. Patterson's observations about emotional abuse through parental alienation are significant. Can you get copies of her notes and Emma's assignments? Already requested them. Good, Marcus. I know this. It is hard to hear, but Emma's emotional distress could be crucial evidence. The court takes the psychological welfare of children very seriously. After we hung up, I sat in my small living room, looking at the art supplies Emma and I had used just last weekend. She'd seemed happy during our time together, but apparently she was carrying the weight of adult deceptions even during our precious hours together. The fight with Sarah was about to get more intense, more public, more painful for everyone involved. But looking at Emma's heartbreaking plea for honesty in her school assignment, I knew I had no choice but to see it through. My daughter deserved better than a childhood built on lies and manipulation. She deserved parents who could put her welfare above their own conflicts, and if Sarah wasn't capable of that, then I would have to fight for both of us. Melissa Chen's law office was nothing like the sterile corporate spaces I'd imagined. Her walls were covered with family photos and children's artwork, and her desk had the comfortable clutter of someone who actually worked with people rather than just pushing papers around. Before we go any further, she said, spreading out gathered evidence across her conference table, I want you to understand exactly what we're alleging and what the potential consequences are. The documents Jake had helped me compile looked oppressive, laid out in organized stacks: property records, business filings, financial disclosures from our original divorce, bank statement fragments, and school counselor reports about Emma's emotional state. Sarah committed fraud during your divorce proceedings by failing to disclose her business partnership with David Chen, Melissa continued. She underreported her income by approximately $150,000 annually, which affects both child support calculations and the division of assets. She pointed to a spreadsheet her forensic accountant had prepared. Based on the corrected financial information, your child support obligation should be roughly 60% of what you're currently paying. More importantly, Sarah's increased income and assets could significantly impact the custody arrangement. What kind of impact? Currently, the court awarded primary custody to Sarah based partly on her claimed financial instability and your demanding work schedule. If we can prove she was actually financially secure while forcing you into that demanding schedule through fraudulent support calculations, it calls her fitness as a guardian into question. Melissa opened another folder. I've also retained Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a child psychologist who specializes in parental alienation cases. She's reviewed Emma's school records and Mrs. Patterson's notes. What's her assessment? Emma is showing classic signs of being caught in a loyalty conflict manufactured by the custodial parent. Dr. Martinez calls it emotional parentification. Emma is being forced to manage adult emotional conflicts that she's developed, incapable of understanding. The clinical language made my daughter's pain sound academic, but I appreciated having professional validation of what I'd been witnessing. The school counselor's documentation is particularly valuable, Melissa continued. Mrs. Patterson followed proper protocols in documenting Emma's statements about being coached to withhold information from you. That's evidence of alienating behavior. She handed me a thick folder. This is our motion to reopen the divorce case based on fraud. We're asking for several things: recalculation of child support based on Sarah's actual income, modification of the custody arrangement to reflect the true financial circumstances, reimbursement of overpaid support, and attorney's fees. What are our chances? Strong. If Sarah doesn't have compelling evidence that we're wrong about her income. Fraud cases are serious business. Judges don't like being lied to. Melissa leaned back in her chair. But I need to prepare you for what Sarah is likely to do in response. She pulled out another document. I've researched David Chen's family businesses extensively. They have a history of creative financial arrangements, loans between family members, property transfers at non-market rates, consulting contracts that look suspiciously like money laundering. If Sarah and David have been smart, they've structured everything to be technically legal while still being ethically questionable. So they might have covered their tracks, possibly. But here's the thing about people who think they're smarter than the system: they usually leave a trail. David's family has been audited by the IRS twice in the past 5 years. That suggests their financial arrangements have attracted attention before. Melissa handed me a timeline she'd created. I think Sarah's been planning this for longer than we initially realized. The timing of your divorce, the formation of the business partnership, Emma's coaching about what to tell you, it's all too coordinated to be coincidental. Looking at the timeline, I felt a chill of recognition. Sarah had suggested the divorce just a few months after David's company had won a major contract with the city, a contract worth millions of dollars. That would have provided plenty of opportunity for the kind of consulting fees Sarah was now claiming as income. You think she left me specifically to hide this business relationship? I think she realized that staying married to you would complicate her ability to participate in David's family business arrangements. Divorced, with primary custody, she could claim financial hardship while actually building wealth. The calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. Sarah hadn't just fallen out of love with me, she'd actively planned to use our daughter as leverage in a financial scheme. There's one more thing, Melissa said carefully. Dr. Martinez wants to interview Emma as part of her assessment. It would be age-appropriate, more like play therapy than formal questioning. But Emma would need to talk about her feelings regarding both households. The thought of my 7-year-old being questioned by strangers about our family dysfunction made my stomach turn, but I understood the necessity. What happens if Emma says something that contradicts our case? Then we adjust our strategy. But Marcus's children are remarkably honest when they feel safe to tell the truth. Emma's school assignments already show she understands more about the situation than the adults have given her credit for. Melissa gathered the documents back into organized stacks. I'm filing the motion next week. Sarah will have 30 days to respond, and then we'll likely have a preliminary hearing within 60 days. During that time, she's going to do everything she can to discredit you in this case, such as expect her to claim you're harassing her, that you're using Emma as a weapon, that you're bitter about her success. She might even try to get a restraining order based on your unannounced visit to her house. I thought about that confrontation, about the fear in Sarah's eyes when I'd mentioned the business documents. I recorded our conversation. She admitted to the business relationship. Good, but be careful. Desperate people do desperate things, and Sarah has a lot to lose if this case goes badly for her. Melissa handed me her card. Don't contact her directly anymore. All communication goes through me from now on, and Marcus, document everything. Every interaction with Emma, every change in her behavior, every comment she makes about what's happening at her mother's house. As I left Melissa's office, I felt the weight of the legal machinery we were setting in motion. This was no longer a private family dispute, it was becoming a formal challenge to Sarah's credibility, her fitness as a parent, and her financial integrity. But thinking about Emma's tearful confession at school, about her plea for honesty in her creative writing assignment, I knew we were doing the right thing. My daughter deserved a childhood free from adult manipulation and lies. The case we were building wasn't just about money or custody schedules. It was about giving Emma permission to love both her parents without feeling like she was betraying anyone. It was about creating a foundation of truth that she could build her life on, rather than the shifting sand of deception that Sarah had constructed. In 30 days, Sarah would have to respond to our allegations with sworn statements and financial documentation. For the first time since our divorce, she would be required to tell the truth under penalty of perjury. I was looking forward to seeing what story she came up with then. The phone call that changed everything came from Jake on a Wednesday morning while I was stocking the produce section at Peterson's Market. His voice had an excitement I hadn't heard since college. "Marcus, you need to sit down for this." I found the smoking gun. I ducked into the store's break room, my heart racing. "What did you find?" I was digging deeper into David Chen's family financial records, following every thread I could find. His father's real estate company, his sister's restaurant chain, his uncle's construction business, all legitimate operations, but something felt off about the money flow. Jake paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. Then I found it. David's grandmother, Helen Chen, died 3 years ago, left behind a substantial estate. We're talking $8 million. Okay, but what does that have to do with Sarah? Everything. The estate was divided into trust funds for the grandchildren. David received $1.2 million, distributed quarterly over 5 years. But here's the kicker: Sarah, Elizabeth Thompson, is listed as a beneficiary. My mind reeled. That's impossible. Sarah never even met David's grandmother. That's what I thought too, so I dug deeper into the trust documents. Jake's voice was tight with controlled excitement. The beneficiary listing shows Sarah Elizabeth Thompson, domestic partner of David Chen, as designated by beneficiary David Chen under the discretionary distribution clause. Domestic partner. It gets better. The trust was modified 18 months ago, 6 months after your divorce was finalized, to include Sarah as David's domestic partner. She's been receiving $50,000 quarterly from David's inheritance. I felt like the floor was dropping out from under me. They've been together this whole time, not just together legally recognized as domestic partners for financial purposes while claiming to be business associates. Sarah has received $400,000 from this trust alone, none of which was disclosed during your divorce proceedings. The magnitude of the deception was staggering. Sarah hadn't just hidden business income, she'd hidden an entire relationship and a substantial inheritance. There's more, Jake continued. The house purchase, it wasn't just sold below market value, it was essentially a gift. David used trust money to buy the house from his father, then sold it to Sarah for the amount she could afford. The real purchase price was covered by trust funds, so Sarah's been living off David's inheritance while claiming poverty, and using your child support payments to supplement a lifestyle funded by money she legally had no right to during your marriage. Marcus, this isn't just fraud, it's systematic deception on a massive scale. I slumped against the break room wall, trying to process what Jake was telling me. Sarah hadn't just moved on after our divorce, she'd been planning her escape to a pre-existing relationship funded by money I never knew existed. How long do you think they've been together? Based on the trust modification timeline and the business formation documents, I'd guess they met about 6 months before Sarah asked for the divorce. The relationship was probably already serious when she started the divorce proceedings. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. Sarah had been with David while we were still married, planning our divorce while building a secret financial relationship that would fund her new life. Jake, Emma, I started, then stopped, overwhelmed by the implications. I know, man, Emma's been living in a house purchased with hidden money, participating in activities funded by inheritance. Sarah had no legal right to, while you worked 3 jobs based on fraudulent financial disclosures. What does this mean legally? It means Sarah committed multiple felonies. Fraud during divorce proceedings, perjury in sworn financial statements, potentially tax evasion if she didn't report the trust distributions properly. Melissa's going to have a field day with this. I thought about Emma's innocent questions about David, her casual mentions of his generosity, her confusion about why Daddy couldn't provide the same lifestyle. My daughter had been living in a house of lies, so elaborate that even she couldn't see the foundation. How did you find the trust documents? Public probate records. Helen Chen's estate was probated in Superior Court, and trust modifications have to be filed with the court clerk. It's all public information, Sarah. And David just assumed no one would think to look. They underestimated you. They underestimated how much I care about you and Emma. And they definitely underestimated how angry I get when people think they can manipulate the system. After we hung up, I sat in the break room staring at my phone, trying to wrap my mind around the scope of Sarah's betrayal. This wasn't a woman who'd fallen out of love and moved on. This was someone who'd systematically dismantled our marriage while positioning herself to profit from its destruction. I called Melissa immediately. Jake found trust documents. I said, without preamble, Sarah's been receiving inheritance money from David's family. A lot of money. How much money? $400,000 so far, with more coming quarterly. None of it was disclosed during the divorce. Melissa was quiet for a long moment. Marcus, this changes the entire case. We're not just talking about hidden business income anymore, we're talking about a deliberate conspiracy to defraud the court and manipulate custody arrangements. What happens now? Now we file an emergency motion. This level of financial fraud could constitute grounds for an immediate custody modification. Emma shouldn't be living in a household built on money obtained through perjury. Will they arrest Sarah? That's up to the district attorney. But yes, this could result in criminal charges. Fraud of this magnitude is a felony. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the conversation I'd had with Emma just last weekend. She'd mentioned casually that David had family money, that his grandmother had been really rich and left money for everyone in the family. "Does that include Mommy?" I'd asked, not thinking much of it at the time. "I think so," Emma had said. "David says Mummy's part of the family now." Part of the family, while claiming to be struggling financially and demanding maximum child support from me. The more I learned about Sarah's deception, the more I realized that Emma had been dropping breadcrumbs all along in his comments that revealed the truth Sarah was desperate to hide. My 7-year-old daughter had been living with more honesty than the adults supposedly protecting her that night. I called my mother and told her everything. She listened in shocked silence as I explained about the business, the trust fund, the systematic lies that had shaped our custody arrangement. "Marcus," she said finally, "I never liked Sarah, but I never imagined she was capable of something this calculated. The worst part is what this has done to Emma. She's been living in 2 completely different worlds, being told different stories by each parent, carrying secrets she's too young to understand. But now you can fix it. Now you can give her the truth, I hope so. But I'm scared about what this is going to do to her when it all comes out. She loves Sarah and she's gotten attached to David when she finds out that her whole life at Sarah's house was built on lies and stolen money. She'll also find out that her father fought for the truth, no matter how hard it was. That's the kind of lesson that shapes character." Marcus, as I hung up with my mother, I thought about Emma's drawings, her creative writing assignments, her tearful questions about why her family couldn't just be honest with each other. In a few weeks, when this all came to light in court, she would finally have her wish. The truth was going to hurt, but it was also going to set us all free. Sarah's house of lies was about to come crashing down, and when it did, Emma would finally to understand why her father had been working so hard, not because he didn't love her, but because he loved her enough to sacrifice everything to support a system built on deception. The revelation of the trust fund wasn't just evidence of fraud, it was proof that every assumption our custody arrangement was based on had been a carefully constructed lie. Tomorrow, Melissa would file our emergency motion, and Sarah would have to explain to a judge why she'd hidden nearly $500,000 while claiming poverty. I was looking forward to hearing that explanation. Melissa's emergency motion hit the family court system like a guided missile. Within 48 hours of filing, we had a hearing scheduled for the following week, and Sarah had been served with papers that laid out every detail of her financial deception. The motion was devastating in its clinical precision, 23 pages documenting hidden assets, undisclosed income, trust fund distributions, property transfers, and business relationships that Sarah had sworn under oath didn't exist. "I've never seen a fraud case this clear-cut," Melissa told me as we prepared for the hearing. "Usually, there's some ambiguity, some gray area the other side can exploit, but Sarah's lies are documented in her own sworn statements." We were sitting in her conference room surrounded by bankers' boxes full of evidence, financial records, trust documents, business filings, property records. The paper trail of Sarah's deception was overwhelming. "What's our strategy?" "Simple. We present the facts chronologically and let Sarah try to explain them away. She swore under oath that her annual income was $48,000. We can prove it was actually close to $200,000. She claimed to have no assets beyond her car and personal belongings. We can show she's received nearly $500,000 in trust distributions." Melissa pulled out a folder marked Exhibit A. "This is her original financial affidavit from your divorce. Every statement about her income, assets, and financial prospects was false. That's perjury, plain and simple." I stared at Sarah's signature on the bottom of the document, remembering the day she'd signed it. She'd seemed nervous then, fidgeting with her pen, asking multiple questions about whether she'd filled everything out correctly. I'd thought she was just stressed about the divorce process. Now I realized she'd been terrified about committing fraud. "What about Emma?" "Dr. Martinez has completed her preliminary assessment. Emma shows clear signs of being coached and manipulated, but she's also remarkably resilient. Children are often stronger than we give them credit for." Melissa handed me Dr. Martinez's report. The clinical language was dense, but the conclusions were clear. Emma was caught in an artificially constructed loyalty conflict, being used as a conduit for information between households, and showing stress responses consistent with emotional manipulation. The good news is that Dr. Martinez believes Emma can recover quickly once the manipulation stops. Children adapt remarkably well to honesty, even difficult honesty. And if we win, what happens to Emma's living situation? That depends on what the judge decides about Sarah's fitness as a guardian. Hiding income is one thing, systematic fraud involving a child's welfare is another. At minimum, we're looking at a significant custody modification. At maximum, you could end up with primary custody. The possibility of having Emma with me most of the time was something I'd hardly dared to hope for, but the idea also terrified me. My current work schedule and small apartment weren't set up for full-time parenting. "I'll need to make changes," I said. "My work situation, my living arrangement. Marcus, if this goes our way, your child support obligation drops by more than half. You'll also likely receive reimbursement for overpayments going back to years." Financially, you'll be in a much better position to provide Emma with stability. Melissa opened another folder. I've also been researching Sarah's likely defense strategies. She'll probably claim the business income is recent, that she didn't know about the trust distributions, that her relationship with David is new and complicated. Will that work? Not with this much documentation. The trust modifications, business formations, and property transfers all have dates that contradict any claim of recent developments. She handed me a timeline that tracked every major financial event in Sarah and David's relationship alongside the dates of our divorce proceedings. The coordination was too perfect to be coincidental. There's something else you need to be prepared for, Melissa said carefully. Sarah's going to attack your character. She'll claim you're harassing her, that you're using Emma as a weapon, that this case is motivated by jealousy rather than concern for Emma's welfare. Is there any merit to those claims? Absolutely not. But Sarah's desperate, and desperate people say desperate things. She might even claim you're an unfit parent, financial instability, demanding work schedule, whatever she can think of. I thought about the 3 jobs I'd been working, the exhaustion I'd been carrying for months, the small apartment where Emma and I spent our weekends together. Some of that might be true. I have been financially unstable, and my work schedule, it has been demanding because you were paying child support based on fraudulent financial disclosures. Once this case is resolved, you'll be able to provide Emma with the stability she deserves without working yourself to death. Melissa closed the folders and leaned back in her chair. Marcus, I want you to understand something. This case is about more than money or custody schedules. It's about establishing a foundation of truth that Emma can build her life on. Right now, she's living in a world where the adults can't be trusted to tell her the truth about basic facts. What do I tell her about what's happening? Age-appropriate honesty. Mummy and Daddy are working with some helpers to figure out the best way to take care of you. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and we're working to fix them no matter what happens. Both Mummy and Daddy love you very much. As I left Melissa's office that afternoon, I felt the weight of the week ahead. In 5 days, Sarah would have to sit in a courtroom and explain, under oath, why she'd hidden nearly $500,000 while claiming poverty. She'd have to justify manipulating Emma's understanding of both parents, and she'd have to account for building a lifestyle funded by money she'd obtained through perjury. But I also felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not just hope for a better financial situation or more time with Emma, but hope that my daughter would finally be able to live in a world where the adults in her life prioritize truth over manipulation. That evening, I called Emma to say goodnight, as I always did. Daddy, are you okay? You sound different. Even at 7, she could hear the change in my voice, the absence of the exhaustion and defeated resignation that had colored our conversations for months. I'm good, sweetheart. Really good. Are you excited about our weekend together? Yes. Can we do art again? I want to draw a new picture of our family. Of course. We can draw whatever you want. Good, because I think our family is going to look different soon, and I want to draw what it really looks like. Her innocent words sent a chill through me. Emma sensed the changes coming, even if she didn't understand what they meant. Different? How? I don't know yet, but different. Better, maybe. As we said goodnight, I realized that Emma had been waiting for this moment as much as I had. The moment when the lies would stop and the truth would finally be allowed to emerge. In 5 days, we would both find out what our family really looked like when it was built on honesty instead of deception. The first sign that Sarah was panicking came through Emma. It was Thursday evening, 2 days before our court hearing, when my daughter called me crying. Daddy, I'm scared. She sobbed into the phone. Mummy's really upset about something, and she keeps asking me questions about what we talk about when I'm with you. My grip tightened on the phone. What kind of questions, sweetheart? She wants to know if you ever asked me about David, or about money, or about the house. And she keeps telling me that if anyone asks me questions, I should say that I love living with her and that you're always working. The coaching had intensified. Sarah was preparing Emma to testify, and the desperation in her approach was both infuriating and heartbreaking. Emma, listen to me carefully. No matter what anyone asks you, just tell the truth. Tell them exactly how you feel and what you think. Don't worry about making anyone happy or sad, just be honest. But Mommy says, I know what Mommy says, but sometimes grown-ups get scared and say things they don't mean. The most important thing is that you tell the truth. Okay. After we hung up, I immediately called Melissa. Sarah's coaching Emma for the hearing. I told her she's scared, and she's making Emma scared too. Document everything. Write down exactly what Emma told you, word for word, with the time and date. This is evidence of ongoing manipulation. But Sarah's desperation went far beyond coaching Emma. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from unknown numbers, 5 voicemails that were mostly heavy breathing or hang-ups, and a series of text messages from Sarah's phone that made my blood run cold. You have no idea what you're destroying. Emma's going to hate you when she finds out what you've done to our family. David's family has lawyers who will bury you. You can't win this. Think about what this is doing to Emma. Think about what you're putting her through. Last chance to drop this before it ruins everyone's life. I screenshot every message and forwarded them to Melissa immediately. Her response was swift and angry. File a police report. Now these are threatening communications, and the volume of calls constitutes harassment. I'm also filing an emergency motion for a restraining order. At the police station, Officer Janet Rodriguez took my statement with the weary professionalism of someone who'd seen too many ugly divorce cases. Has she made any direct threats of violence? She asked. Not explicitly, but the volume and timing feel threatening, and she's using our daughter to gather information about my legal strategy. We'll document everything and forward it to the DA's office. If she contacts you again before the hearing, call us immediately. That afternoon brought a new development that showed just how far Sarah was willing to go. Emma's school called to say that Sarah had tried to withdraw Emma from classes, claiming they were moving out of state due to family circumstances. Mrs. Patterson, the school counselor, had refused to release Emma without proper documentation and court approval, but the attempt revealed Sarah's mindset. She was considering fleeing rather than facing the consequences of her fraud. When I called Melissa about the attempted school withdrawal, her voice was tight with controlled anger. She's spiraling. The threatening texts, the coaching. Now trying to remove Emma from school. These are the actions of someone who knows she's about to lose everything. Is Emma safe? I'm filing an emergency motion right now to prevent Sarah from removing Emma from the state. We'll also request supervised visitation until the hearing. But Sarah wasn't done. That evening, David appeared at my apartment building, waiting by my car when I got home from work. We need to talk, he said, his usual polished demeanor replaced by something harder, more desperate. I don't think that's a good idea, I replied, pulling out my phone. I'd learned to record everything. You have no idea what you're doing to Emma, he said, stepping closer. She's happy. She's thriving. You're about to destroy her stability out of jealousy. I'm about to give her the truth. The truth. The truth is that Sarah and I can provide Emma with opportunities you never could. Private schools, travel, cultural experiences. We're building something beautiful for her, built on fraud and lies. David's carefully maintained composure cracked. You think you're so righteous, working your 3 little jobs, playing the martyred father. You have no idea what real success looks like. I know what honesty looks like. Honesty. He laughed bitterly. You want to drag Emma through court proceedings, expose her to publicity, destroy her mother's reputational. Because you can't handle that, Sarah moved on to something better funded by money she stole. We didn't steal anything. Every dollar Sarah received was legally distributed from a legitimate trust. The fact that you were too small-minded to understand our business arrangement doesn't make it fraud. But even as he said it, David's confidence was wavering. He knew the legal situation was desperate, or he wouldn't be standing in my parking lot trying to intimidate me. David, I know you care about Emma. If you really want what's best for her, convince Sarah to tell the truth in court. Admit the fraud. Accept the consequences. And let Emma live in a world where the adults don't lie to her. You don't understand. Sarah's family, her reputation. This case will destroy more than just her finances. For the first time, I heard something like genuine emotion in David's voice. Whatever else was happening, he seemed to actually care about Sarah, and perhaps even about Emma. Then she should have thought about that before committing perjury. David stared at me for a long moment, and I saw him cycling through what looked like different arguments before finally settling on one last attempt at intimidation. My family has connections. Marcus, political connections, business connections. You think this ends with a family court hearing, but you have no idea how deep this goes. Are you threatening me? I'm telling you that you're playing in a league you don't understand. I stopped the recording and put my phone away. David, I understand exactly what league I'm playing in. It's called the truth, and in that league, I have the winning hand. As he walked away, I realized that David's visit had revealed something important. Sarah and her co-conspirators were terrified. The threatening texts, the coaching of Emma, the attempted school withdrawal, and now David's clumsy intimidation attempt all pointed to people who knew their carefully constructed world was about to collapse. That night, I called Emma to say goodnight, but Sarah answered the phone. Emma can't talk to you, she said, her voice cold and formal. She's too upset about what you're putting her through. Sarah, let me talk to my daughter. Your daughter is fine, she's safe, and she's where she belongs. But she doesn't need to hear from the man who's trying to destroy her family. The line went dead. I immediately called Melissa, who filed another emergency motion for contempt of court. Sarah was violating the custody order by preventing my contact with Emma. 2 days before our hearing, Sarah had shown her true character. The mask of the devoted mother was gone, replaced by someone willing to use our daughter as a weapon and a shield. She was threatening me, coaching Emma, trying to flee the state, and now preventing my contact with Emma entirely. But in her desperation, Sarah had also handed us evidence of exactly why the custody arrangement needed to change. No fit parent uses their child as a tool of manipulation, and no honest person responds to accusations of fraud with threats and intimidation. Tomorrow, we would walk into court with documentation of Sarah's deception, evidence of her manipulation of Emma, and proof of her increasingly erratic behavior as the truth closed in around her. The fight was almost over, and Sarah's own actions were ensuring that justice would prevail. The family courthouse was an imposing building of gray stone and tall windows that made everyone who entered feel small and vulnerable. I arrived 30 minutes early, dressed in the best suit I owned, a decade-old navy blue that Jake had helped me press the night before. Melissa was already there, surrounded by bankers' boxes and looking every inch the competent attorney she was. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Terrified and ready," I replied honestly. "Good, that's exactly how you should feel." Sarah arrived with her attorney, an expensive-looking woman in a designer suit who carried herself with the kind of confidence that money could buy. But it was Sarah herself who shocked me. The polished, put-together woman I'd been married to was gone. Her hair was pulled back severely. Her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her hands shook slightly as she organized papers at the defendant's table. David sat in the gallery behind her, his usual cocky demeanor replaced by visible nervousness. The man who'd tried to intimidate me in my parking lot looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Judge Margaret Holloway entered with the no-nonsense bearing of someone who'd seen every form of human deception imaginable. She was known for running an efficient courtroom and having little patience for lies or manipulation. "This is an emergency hearing on plaintiff's motion to reopen the divorce case of Thompson versus Thompson based on allegations of fraud," Judge Holloway began. "I've reviewed the initial filings, and I must say, these are serious accusations. Ms. Chen, you're representing the respondent." Sarah's attorney, Lisa Cheno, relation to David, I'd been assured stood smoothly. "Yes, Your Honor. My client categorically denies the allegations of fraud and maintains that all financial disclosures during the original proceedings were accurate to the best of her knowledge at the time." "Ms. Rivera, you're representing the petitioner." Melissa stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We have substantial evidence that the respondent committed perjury during the original divorce proceedings by hiding assets, income, and a romantic relationship that materially affected the financial calculations." "Very well, Ms. Rivera. Present your evidence." What followed was the most methodical destruction of a person's credibility I'd ever witnessed. Melissa began with Sarah's original financial affidavit, projecting it on a screen for the entire courtroom to see. "Your Honor, on March 15, 2023, the respondent swore under oath that her annual income was $48,000 and that she had no assets beyond personal property valued at less than $10,000. Then came the business documents. We have evidence that the respondent was a co-owner of Velocity Marketing Solutions, which generated approximately $200,000 in revenue annually, with the respondent's share being approximately $100,000. Next, the trust documents. The respondent has received $400,000 in distributions from the Helen Chen Family Trust as the designated domestic partner of David Chen. Finally, the property records. The respondent purchased a $485,000 home with cash, facilitated by her domestic partner's family connections. Each piece of evidence was more damning than the last. Sarah's attorney tried to object to various documents, but Judge Holloway allowed almost everything, clearly interested in seeing the full scope of the alleged deception. "Ms. Rivera, do you have any evidence regarding the timeline of when these financial arrangements began?" "Yes, Your Honor." Melissa projected a timeline that showed the trust modifications, business formation, and property purchases all occurring within months of Sarah's divorce filing. "The evidence suggests these arrangements were in place during the marriage and deliberately concealed during divorce proceedings." Judge Holloway turned to Sarah's attorney, "Ms. Chen, how does your client explain these discrepancies?" Lisa Chen stood, but for the first time since the hearing began, she looked uncertain. "Your Honor, my client's financial situation changed rapidly after the divorce due to business opportunities that arose through her relationship with Mr. David Chen. At the time of the original proceedings, she had no knowledge of the trust that would later become available to her. But the trust modification documents are dated 6 months after the divorce filing," Judge Holloway observed, "and the business formation documents predate the divorce by several months. The business was initially a casual collaboration that formalized over time. The trust distributions were unexpected." "Ms. Chen, I'm looking at sworn affidavits from your client stating she had no romantic relationships that would affect her financial status. Are you saying she forgot about her domestic partnership with Mr. David Chen?" The courtroom was silent. Sarah's attorney had no answer that didn't implicate her client in perjury. Judge Holloway turned to Sarah directly. "Ms. Thompson, please stand." Sarah rose unsteadily, her face pale. "You understand that perjury in family court proceedings is a felony?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you understand that concealing assets during divorce proceedings is fraud?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you have any explanation for why your sworn financial statements were so dramatically inaccurate?" Sarah looked at her attorney, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. Then she looked at David in the gallery, who was staring at his hands. Your Honor, I was scared about my financial future. I thought I made mistakes in my calculations." "Ms. Thompson, these weren't calculation errors. This was systematic concealment of nearly $500,000 in assets and income. This court takes financial fraud very seriously, particularly when it affects child custody and support arrangements. Judge Holloway turned back to Melissa. Ms. Rivera, do you have evidence regarding the impact of this fraud on the minor child? Melissa presented Dr. Martinez's report about Emma's emotional state, Mrs. Patterson's school counselor notes, and documentation of Sarah's recent attempts to coach Emma and prevent communication with me. Your Honor, the child is showing clear signs of emotional distress caused by being caught between conflicting narratives from her parents. The respondent has been coaching the child to conceal information and has recently attempted to withdraw her from school and prevent contact with the petitioner. Judge Holloway studied the school counselor's reports for several minutes, her expression growing increasingly stern. Ms. Chen, does your client have any response to the allegations of parental alienation and child coaching? Your Honor, my client has been trying to protect her daughter from unnecessary stress by lying to her about her father's circumstances and coaching her to conceal information from court-appointed professionals. The hearing continued for 3 hours, but the outcome was clear long before Judge Holloway called for a recess to consider her ruling. Sarah had no credible defense for the level of deception we'd documented, and her recent behavior had only that made things worse. When court reconvened, Judge Holloway's voice was crisp and decisive. This court finds that the respondent committed fraud during the original divorce proceedings by concealing substantial assets and income. The original custody and support orders are hereby vacated pending a full review, she continued. Effective immediately, custody of the minor child is modified to joint physical custody with equal time sharing. Child support obligations are suspended pending recalculation based on accurate financial information. But the most important part came last. This court is referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal prosecution. For perjury and fraud, Ms. Thompson, you are ordered to surrender your passport and are prohibited from removing the minor child from this county without court approval. As the gavel fell, I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. Justice had been served, but at a tremendous cost to everyone involved. Especially Emma. Sarah collapsed into her chair, finally understanding that her carefully constructed house of lies had cost her everything: her credibility, her financial advantage, and most importantly, her daughter's trust. The truth had finally won, but the real work of rebuilding Emma's world was just beginning. The immediate aftermath of the court hearing was surreal. Within hours, everything that had defined my life for the past 2 years was turned upside down. Melissa's office became a war room as we worked through the practical implications of Judge Holloway's ruling. The recalculated child support means Sarah owes you approximately $47,000 in overpayments, Melissa explained, spreading new financial projections across her desk. Your ongoing obligation drops from $1,800 per month to $650. The numbers felt abstract. For so long, I'd structured my entire existence around the crushing weight of those support payments. The idea that I could quit 2 of my 3 jobs and still meet my obligations seemed impossible. What about the criminal charges? The DA's office will decide whether to prosecute within 60 days. Fraud of this magnitude usually results in charges, but Sarah's cooperation with asset recovery could influence their decision. But the most complicated issue was Emma herself. Under the new custody arrangement, she would be with me half the time, including weekdays, which meant school pickup, homework help, bedtime routines, all the normal parenting responsibilities I'd been denied for 2 years. The problem was that my current life wasn't set up for full-time parenting. My 1-bedroom apartment, my overnight work schedule, my complete lack of school day routines, everything needed to change immediately. I need to find a bigger place, I told Jake over coffee the morning after the hearing, and I need to quit the night job. You can afford to now, he reminded me. Your support obligation just dropped by 70%, but money wasn't the biggest challenge. Emma was. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that her entire life has been built on lies? How do you help her understand that the parent she'd been taught to see as irresponsible had actually been working himself to death for her? The answer came from Emma herself. 2 days after the hearing, during our first officially scheduled midweek dinner, she looked at me across the table at our usual pizza place and said, "Daddy, I know things are different now." "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Mummy's been crying a lot, and David moved out. And Mummy told me I'm going to spend more time with you now." She picked at her pizza crust thoughtfully. She also said she made some mistakes with money. I chose my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, even big mistakes. What matters is that we try to fix them and do better. Did Mummy lie about things? The direct question took my breath away. Emma's emotional intelligence had always been remarkable. But this was different. This was her trying to process betrayal by someone she loved. "What do you think?" I asked gently. "I think maybe she did. Because you never seemed like someone who didn't want to see me. You always seemed happy when we were together. And you always seemed tired, like you were working really hard for something important. You are the most important thing in my life, Emma. Everything I do because I love you, I know. And I think Mummy loves me too." But maybe she got confused about how to show it. Her wisdom and generosity broke my heart. Even at 7, Emma was trying to find a way to love both her parents, despite being caught in the middle of their conflict. "What's going to happen now?" she asked. "Now we figure out how to be a family in a new way. You'll spend time with both Mummy and me, but more time than before, and we'll all work on being more honest with each other. Will you still have to work so much?" "Not as much. I'll have more time to spend with you, to help with homework, to do fun things together." Her face lit up like art. "Every day if you want." The practical changes came quickly. Within a week I'd found a 2-bedroom apartment in Emma's school district. It wasn't fancy, but it had space for Emma's things, a small yard where she could play, and most importantly, it was ours. Mr. Peterson was understanding about my schedule change. "I figured something was up when you stopped looking like you were carrying the weight of the world," he said when I explained I could only work day shifts now. Quitting the delivery job was easier. I simply stopped logging into the app, but the office cleaning job was harder to leave. The night manager, Carlos, had been kind to me during my darkest months. "You seem different," he observed on my last shift. "Lighter." Things worked out, I told him finally. The hardest part was watching Emma adjust to the truth about her mother. Sarah's carefully constructed persona as the successful, stable parent had crumbled, and Emma was old enough to understand that something fundamental had changed. "Mommy seems different now," Emma told me during her first week in our new custody arrangement. "She's sad all the time, and she keeps saying she's sorry about things." "How does that make you feel?" "Confused. I love Mummy, but I'm also mad at her for lying." "Is it okay to be mad at someone you love?" "It's very okay. You can love someone and still be upset about their choices." The financial recovery was faster than anyone expected. Sarah's assets were frozen pending full disclosure, and the court appointed a forensic accountant to trace every dollar she'd hidden. The trust fund distributions alone provided enough money to cover my overpaid support, legal fees, and a substantial damage award. But more importantly, the truth was finally out. Emma no longer had to carry secrets between households, no longer had to pretend that one parent was superior to the other, no longer had to manage adult emotions she was too young to understand. 3 weeks after the hearing, I received a check for $52,000, the overpaid child support plus interest and penalties. I stared at it for a long time, thinking about all the nights I'd worked until dawn, all the meals I'd skipped to save money, all the times I'd chosen paying bills over spending money on Emma. That evening, I took Emma shopping for furniture for her new room. "We can get whatever you want," I told her as we walked through the store. "Really, anything within reason." She chose a simple white bed with built-in storage, a small desk for homework, and a bookshelf for her growing collection of art supplies. As we waited for delivery, she held my hand and said, "Daddy, this feels more like home already." The custody arrangement was working better than anyone had expected. Emma thrived on the predictable schedule, the honest communication, and the absence of manipulation. Her grades improved, her behavioral issues at school disappeared, and Mrs. Patterson reported that she seemed remarkably well adjusted for a child going through major family changes. Sarah struggled more. The criminal charges were still pending. David had indeed moved out and cut contact with both Sarah and Emma, and she was facing the possibility of bankruptcy as the court recovered hidden assets. But more than the financial consequences, she was dealing with the loss of Emma's trust. She asks me why I lied to her. Sarah told me during one of our awkward custody exchanges. "I don't know what to say." "Tell her the truth," I suggested. "Tell her you made mistakes and you're sorry." "It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple. Emma doesn't need complicated explanations about business arrangements or trust funds. She needs to know that you love her enough to be honest, even when honesty is hard." A month after the hearing, Dr. Martinez completed her follow-up assessment of Emma. "The change is remarkable," she told me. "Emma's stress indicators have dropped dramatically. She's no longer showing signs of divided loyalties or emotional manipulation. She seems to understand that both parents love her, but that one parent made some serious mistakes." "How does she process the lies?" "Children are remarkably resilient when adults take responsibility for their actions. Emma knows her mother lied, but she also sees her mother trying to make amends. That's actually a powerful lesson about accountability and forgiveness." The most surprising change was in my relationship with Emma. Without the constant stress of financial pressure and limited time together, I was able to be the father I'd always wanted to be. We developed routines, homework at the kitchen table, bedtime stories in her new room, weekend adventures that didn't require careful budgeting. "You're different too, Daddy," Emma observed one evening as I helped her with a math worksheet. "Different how?" "Happier. Less worried. You smile more." She was right. For the first time since our divorce, I wasn't carrying the weight of Sarah's deception. I could focus on being Emma's father instead of working myself to death to fund a lie. The criminal case moved forward slowly. Sarah's attorney negotiated a plea agreement that would avoid jail time in exchange for full restitution and community service. But the process served as a constant reminder of the consequences of deception. "Will Mummy go to jail?" Emma asked after overhearing a phone conversation with Melissa. "Probably not. but she'll have to work very hard to fix the mistakes she made. Good. I don't want her to go to jail, but I want her to understand that lying hurts people. As the dust settled from the legal battle, I realized that the victory wasn't just about money or custody schedules. It was about giving Emma the foundation of truth she deserved. She could finally love both her parents without having to choose sides, could trust that the adults in her life would be honest with her, and could build her understanding of the world on facts rather than manipulation. The consequences of Sarah's fraud were severe and lasting, but they also created space for healing and authentic relationships. Emma was no longer a pawn in someone else's game. She was simply a loved child with two parents who were finally committed to telling her the truth, no matter how difficult that truth might be. 2 months after the court hearing, Emma's art was telling a different story. Gone were the drawings of 2 separate houses with lonely figures and divided loyalties. Her new pictures showed a complex but honest family, sometimes sad, sometimes happy, but always connected by love and truth. "This is us now," she explained, showing me her latest creation during our Thursday evening art time. The drawing showed 2 houses again, but now they were connected by a bridge. Stick figures moved freely between them, and the sun was shining over both. "Tell me about the bridge," I said. "That's the truth," she said matter-of-factly. "Before, I couldn't talk about one house when I was in the other house. Now I can talk about anything anywhere. So there's a bridge," her simple wisdom continued to amaze me. At 8 years old, Emma had articulated something that many adults struggle to understand: that relationships thrive on honest communication, even when that honesty reveals difficult truths. The rebuilding process hadn't been easy for any of us. Sarah was attending court-mandated counseling and slowly learning how to interact with Emma without manipulation or coaching. Their relationship was different now, less polished, more authentic, sometimes painful but ultimately healthier. "Mommy cries sometimes when she talks about the lying," Emma told me during one of our bedtime conversations. "She says she's sorry she hurt both of us." "How do you feel when she cries?" "Sad for her, but also, I don't know the word, try to describe it. Like she's finally telling me true feelings instead of pretending feelings." Emma was experiencing her mother's genuine remorse, and while it was painful, it was also more honest than anything Sarah had shown her in years. The practical aspects of our new life were settling into comfortable routines. My reduced work schedule meant I could pick Emma up from school on my days, help with homework, attend parent-teacher conferences, and participate in the daily rhythms of parenting I'd been denied for so long. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, noticed the change immediately. "She's much more settled," she told me during our first conference under the new custody arrangement. "Her work quality has improved. She's more engaged in class discussions, and she seems generally happier. Any concerns? None academically. Emotionally, she's processing a lot, but she has excellent coping skills for her age. Whatever you and her mother are doing to help her through this transition, it's working." The financial stability was transformative but also strange. After 2 years of carefully budgeting every dollar, having enough money for groceries, utilities, and Emma's activities without constant stress felt almost surreal. I could say yes when Emma asked for art supplies, could afford the school fundraiser activities, could plan weekend outings without calculating the cost of gas and admission fees. But more important than the money was the time. Emma and I developed new traditions: Wednesday movie nights, Saturday morning farmers market trips, Sunday afternoon bike rides. Simple activities that we'd never been able to do consistently when I was working 3 jobs. "I like having a regular schedule," Emma told me one evening as I tucked her into bed in her new room. "I know when I'll see you and when I'll see Mommy, and I don't have to worry about surprises." Surprises used to be stressful. Yeah, because I never knew if they were good surprises or bad surprises. Like when Mommy would say you couldn't see me because something came up. I never knew if that was true or if it was one of her ... mistakes. Emma had started calling Sarah's lies mistakes, which seemed to help her process the betrayal without completely rejecting her mother. Dr. Martinez had suggested the language, explaining that children need a way to acknowledge wrongdoing without losing hope for redemption. The most remarkable change was in Emma's relationship with honesty itself. She'd always been a truthful child, but now she seemed to treasure honesty as something precious and fragile. "Daddy, can I tell you something that might make you sad?" she asked one Saturday morning as we painted together at our kitchen table. "Of course, sweetheart. Sometimes I miss the big house and the nice things at Mommy's old house. I know those things came from lying money, but they were still nice." Her confession was heartbreaking and beautiful. She was learning to acknowledge complex feelings without guilt or shame. "It's okay to miss nice things," I told her, "and it's okay to have complicated feelings about everything that happened. But I like our life now better, even without the fancy stuff." "Why?" "Because nobody has to pretend anything. You don't have to pretend you're not tired from working so much. Mommy doesn't have to pretend she's not sad about her mistakes. And I don't have to pretend I don't notice when grown-ups are lying." Emma's insight into the toll that deception had taken on everyone was profound. She understood that the truth, while sometimes painful, was ultimately liberating for the entire family. Sarah's adjustment was more difficult. Without David's financial support and facing substantial legal bills, she'd had to sell the house and move into a modest apartment. The BMW was gone, replaced by a used Honda. The expensive activities Emma had enjoyed were scaled back to more reasonable levels, but perhaps most challenging for Sarah was learning to parent without manipulation. In counseling, she was discovering how much of her interaction with Emma had been designed to create a particular narrative rather than foster genuine connection. I'm learning to ask Emma how she feels instead of telling her how she should feel, Sarah admitted during one of our brief conversations at pickup. It's harder than I expected, but probably more honest. Definitely more honest. And Emma responds better to questions than to guidance. The word guidance was Sarah's new euphemism for the coaching and manipulation she was trying to stop. It was progress, even if the language was still careful and self-protective. 3 months after the court hearing, Emma had her first sleepover with a friend from school. As I helped her pack her overnight bag, she seemed thoughtful and slightly nervous. "What if Maya's parents asked me about the divorce and the court stuff?" she asked. "What would you want to tell them?" "The truth, I guess. That my parents had some problems, but we're working them out, and I love both of them." "That sounds perfect. But what if they ask about why mommy got in trouble?" "You can say that's private family business, and you don't have to explain adult problems to other adults." Emma nodded, satisfied with having a plan for handling difficult questions. She was learning to protect her own emotional boundaries while still being honest, a skill that would serve her well throughout her life. As I watched her run into Maya's house with her overnight bag, chattering excitedly about their plans, I realized how far we'd all come. Emma was no longer the anxious, conflicted child who'd asked me why I didn't want to see her. She was confident, honest, and secure in the knowledge that both her parents loved her, even if one of them had made serious mistakes. The foundation of trust we were rebuilding wasn't perfect. Probably never would be completely, but it was real, honest, and strong enough to support Emma's continued growth and happiness. The job offer came on a Tuesday morning in March, 6 months after our court victory. I was restocking the produce section at Peterson's Market when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Thompson, this is Jennifer Walsh from Meridian Logistics. We received your resume and would like to discuss a warehouse management position." I'd almost forgotten about the applications I'd submitted months earlier, back when steady work hours and decent pay seemed like impossible dreams. Now, with my financial situation stabilized and Emma's schedule requiring my presence during after-school hours, a regular day job with benefits seemed not just possible but necessary. The position offers a starting salary of $52,000 annually, plus health benefits and a retirement plan, Jennifer continued. "When would you be available for an interview?" $52,000, more than I'd made from all 3 of my previous jobs combined, and it was just one job with normal hours. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. The interview went well. My experience with inventory management, scheduling, and working under pressure skills I'd developed during my months of juggling multiple jobs made me an attractive candidate for a position that required organization and reliability. "We're looking for someone who understands that this work matters," the hiring manager explained. "It's not glamorous, but it's the backbone of everything we do." I thought about Emma's drawings of our family, about the bridge she'd drawn between our 2 houses, about the stability she deserved. "I understand," I said. "I've learned that the most important work isn't always the most visible work." They offered me the position on the spot, telling Mr. Peterson was harder than I'd expected. He'd been kind to me during my darkest months, accommodating my impossible schedule and never making me feel like charity case. "I'm happy for you, Marcus," he said when I gave my notice. "You've been one of the most reliable employees I've ever had, and you deserve better than stocking shelves for someone else's dream. This job taught me a lot about honest work, and you taught us something about persistence. Emma's lucky to have a father who never gave up." My last day at the market was bittersweet. Several customers I'd gotten to know during my early morning shifts stopped to wish me well. "Carlos from the cleaning company sent a text. Heard about your new job. Always knew you were meant for bigger things." The night before starting at Meridian Logistics, Emma helped me organize my new work clothes, khakis and polo shirts instead of the uniform shirts I'd worn for so long. "Are you nervous about your new job?" she asked as we laid everything out. "A little." "Are you nervous about me having different hours?" "No, because now you'll be home when I get home from school every day, and weekends will just be for us, not for working." Emma's excitement about our new routine was infectious. She'd spent so much of her young life adapting to adult schedules and adult problems. Now she was finally going to experience the predictability that most children took for granted. The job itself was exactly what I needed. Managing warehouse operations for a regional distribution company required the organizational skills I'd developed juggling multiple jobs, but it also offered something I'd almost forgotten was possible: intellectual engagement. I was solving problems, improving systems, leading a team of people who respected my experience and judgment. "You seem different," Emma observed after my first week. "More, I don't know. More like you're using your brain for interesting things." What do you mean? Before, you always looked tired and kind of empty when you came home from work. Now you look tired but full, like you learned something new. Once again, Emma's insight was remarkable. I was intellectually stimulated in a way I hadn't been in years, and the satisfaction of doing meaningful work was evident to everyone around me. The regular schedule also meant I could be present for Emma's activities in ways I'd never been able to before. When she joined the school art club, I could attend the showcases. When she started taking piano lessons, a decision we made together based on her interest, not someone else's financial manipulation. I could drive her to lessons and listen to her practice. I like that you know about my whole life now, she told me one evening as she played a simple melody she'd learned. Before, I felt like I had to explain everything to you because you missed so much. Now I don't miss much. Now you don't miss anything important. Sarah's situation continued to improve slowly. The criminal case had been resolved with a plea agreement that required restitution, community service and probation, but no jail time. She'd found work with a small non-profit organization, honest work that paid modestly but allowed her to rebuild her professional reputation. More importantly, her relationship with Emma was gradually healing, without the pressure to maintain a false narrative. Sarah was learning to connect with Emma authentically. Their conversations were more honest, their activities were more genuine, and Emma was beginning to trust her mother again. Mummy's getting better at telling the truth, Emma reported after a weekend at Sarah's new apartment. She told me she was sad about losing the house, instead of pretending everything was fine. How did that make you feel? Good, I think. Like, she trusts me enough to share real feelings. The three of us even managed our first successful co-parenting event at our school spring concert. We sat together in the auditorium, watching Emma sing with her class, and for the first time since our divorce, we felt like a family again. Not the same family we'd been, but a different kind of family, one built on honesty instead of illusion. After the concert, as we walked to our cars, Sarah stopped me. Marcus, I want you to know I'm proud of how you fought for Emma. I'm proud of how you fought for the truth, even when it was hard. Thank you, and I'm sorry for all of it. For the lies, for the manipulation, for making you work so hard to support a system based on deception. It was the apology I'd needed to hear, but more importantly, it was the apology Emma had needed to witness. She was learning that adults could take responsibility for their mistakes, could acknowledge harm they'd caused, and could work to rebuild trust. 3 weeks later, I received my first promotion at Meridian Logistics to Senior Warehouse Manager, with a salary increase and additional responsibilities. When I told Emma the news, she asked if we could celebrate by having a special dinner together. What would make it special? I asked if we could invite Mummy too, like a family dinner, but not a fake family dinner, a real one. So we did. Sarah came to our apartment, her first visit since I'd moved, and we ordered pizza and sat around our small kitchen table talking about Emma's school projects, my new job responsibilities, and Sarah's volunteer work with the nonprofit. It wasn't the life any of us had planned, but it was honest and it was ours. Emma laughed at my jokes, shared her latest artwork with both of us, and seemed completely at ease with the strange new dynamic we'd created. As Sarah prepared to leave that evening, Emma hugged both of us and said, "This is what I always wanted. Not the big house or the fancy car, just for everyone to be real with each other." Standing in my small apartment, surrounded by the life we'd built on truth instead of deception, I realized that Emma had gotten exactly what she'd always wanted, a family that chose honesty over comfort, authenticity over appearance, and love over manipulation. That new beginning we'd built wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time since our divorce, that felt like enough. Emma's 8th birthday fell on a Saturday in May, exactly 1 year after the day she'd looked at me with tears in her eyes and asked why I didn't want to see her anymore. As I helped her hang streamers in our living room, I marveled at how much had changed, not just in our circumstances, but in Emma herself. "I want to invite both my families," she announced as we planned her party. "My friends from school, and my family from both houses. Both families. You're my daddy family, and Mummy's my mummy family. But you're both my family." Her language reflected the clarity she'd gained about her place in our complicated world. Emma no longer felt torn between conflicting loyalties. She understood that love wasn't a zero-sum game, and that she could fully belong to both households without betraying either. The party was small but joyful. Emma's school friends played in our tiny backyard while the adults, Sarah, Jake, my mother, and I watched from lawn chairs and marveled at how normal everything felt. There was no tension, no hidden agendas, no manipulation, just a birthday party for a little girl who deserved to be celebrated by everyone who loved her. "She seems so confident," my mother observed, watching Emma demonstrate a card trick to her friends. "Not just happy confident, like she knows exactly who she is." "She does know who she is," Sarah said quietly. "For the first time, she knows who she is." It was true. Emma had spent her early childhood navigating shifting narratives about her family, her parents, and her own worth. Now she had a stable foundation of truth to build on, and the difference was remarkable. When it came time for presents, Emma opened each gift with genuine excitement. Art supplies from me, a science kit from Sarah, books from my mother, a puzzle from Jake, But it was the last gift that made everyone tear up. "This one's from me to all of us," Emma announced, handing me a wrapped package she'd clearly prepared herself. Inside was a photo album she'd made, filled with pictures from the past year, some from our apartment, some from Sarah's new place, some from school events where we'd all been present. But it was the cover that took my breath away in Emma's careful handwriting. She'd written "My Real Family, the True Story." Below the title was a drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, with the words "Love is telling the truth" written in colorful letters. "I wanted to show what our family really looks like," Emma explained. "Not the pretend, the version, but the real one. The one where everybody tells the truth and everybody loves each other, even when things are hard." Sarah wiped her eyes, and I realized she was crying not the manipulative tears I'd seen during our marriage, but genuine emotion at witnessing our daughter's wisdom and resilience. "Emma," Sarah said softly, "this is the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me. It's for all of us to share," Emma replied, "because we're all in the story together." After the party, as we cleaned up wrapping paper and leftover cake, Emma pulled me aside. "Daddy, can I tell you something always? Remember when I asked you why you didn't want to see me anymore?" The memory still hurt, but the pain was different now. After, more like sadness for what we'd lost than anger at what had been taken. "Remember, I know now that you always wanted to see me. I know you were working so hard because you loved me, not because you didn't care about me. How do you know that? Because now I see how you are when you don't have to work all the time. You're not tired and worried, you're happy and present, and I can tell the difference." Emma's ability to understand the connection between circumstances and behavior continued to amaze me. At 8 years old, she grasped concepts that many adults struggled with. "I'm sorry it took so long for the truth to come out," I told her. "I'm not sorry," she said firmly, "because now I know that you'll always fight for what's right, even when it's hard. And I know that even when grown-ups make mistakes, they can fix them if they really try." That evening, after Emma had gone to bed clutching her favorite birthday gift, a stuffed elephant from her friend I found myself standing in her doorway, watching her sleep and reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. 2 years ago, I'd been a broken man working 3 jobs to support a system built on lies. Watching my relationship with my daughter deteriorate under the weight of manipulation I didn't understand. I'd felt helpless, exhausted, and defeated. Now I was the senior manager of a distribution center, living in a comfortable apartment with my daughter half the time, able to provide for her needs without sacrificing my health or sanity. More importantly, Emma knew the truth about both her parents, their strengths, their flaws, their love for her, and their commitment to honesty going forward. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been painful court hearings, difficult conversations, financial struggles, and emotional upheaval for everyone involved. But in the end, the truth had set us all free from the exhausting work of maintaining lies, free from the anxiety of hidden agendas, free from the manipulation that had poisoned our family dynamics. My phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. "Hope Emma had a wonderful birthday. You should be proud you gave her the greatest gift possible." The truth, she was right. The expansive toys and fancy vacations that David and Sarah had provided were temporary pleasures. But the foundation of honesty we'd built would serve Emma for the rest of her life. She would never again have to wonder if the adults in her life were telling her the truth. Never again have to carry secrets that weren't hers to keep. Never again have to choose between loving her parents. As I turned off the lights and headed to my own room, I thought about the card Emma had made me for my birthday last month. It showed a drawing of the 2 of us holding hands under a sunny sky, with the words "Best Daddy Ever" written in her careful handwriting. But it was the message inside that I'd treasured most. "Thank you for working so hard for me, and thank you for teaching me that telling the truth is always worth it, even when it's scary." Emma had learned the most important lesson of all, that love and truth were inseparable. That authentic relationships required honest communication, and that fighting for what's right was always worthwhile, even when the cost seemed too high. Lying in bed that night, I realized that Emma's birthday had marked more than just another year of her life. It had marked the completion of our journey from deception to truth, from manipulation to authenticity, from a family built on lies to a family built on love. Little girl who had once asked me why I didn't want to see her now knew beyond any doubt that she was loved, valued, and worth fighting for. She knew that sometimes adults make terrible mistakes, but that those mistakes don't have to define the future. Most importantly, she knew that her father had never stopped loving her, had never stopped fighting for her, and would always choose the difficult truth over the comfortable lie that had taken 3 jobs, countless sleepless nights, a legal battle, and the courage to challenge a system built on deception. But in the end, the truth had won, and Emmy, beautiful, wise, honest Emmy, had gotten the family she deserved, a family built on truth, sustained by love, and committed to never again letting lies poison the sacred trust between parent and child that was worth everything.